Once again, I'm going to review a video where Peter Zeihan, the internet's favorite geopolitical analyst, says clueless things about the electricity grid. I will also point out one thing that he definitely gets right that a lot of people overlook.
What is it going to look like if we're going to do all these data centers, much less consider doubling the size of America's industrial plant? How much power do we need, and what is it going to look like on the other side? How do we get there?
This is a very good question.
Everyone broadly agrees on the problem here. One of the big weaknesses in the United States' grid is it's not very well interconnected. We don't have a lot of cross-state, large-scale electricity transmission lines. And what that means is that regardless of where you need electricity, you're kind of stuck with local resources in order to get what you need.
As I said in this video, this statement is true if you're in Texas. But the rest of the country, not so much. Looking at this map of the transmission network, we see lots of transmission lines in the East and Pacific, but not much between the Sierra Nevada and Rocky Mountains. In California, there's a power line going up the Pacific Northwest that imports large amounts of hydropower. There are new power lines under construction that will bring wind and solar power to the region from Arizona and Wyoming. In this channel, I've done many videos talking about the challenges and opportunities of long-distance electricity transmission. You can check out this playlist if you want to learn more.
And that means you're going to be overbuilding capacity in order to guarantee what you need, which means you're going to have more facilities than the nameplate would suggest. And they're going to be running at lower capacity, and that's particularly true if you want to do something, say, with green tech. So, for example, if you put a big solar farm in, say, Arizona, you're going to generate 3 times as much electricity as if you do it outside of New York City.
I think the main advantage of building transmission lines is that regions can share power. Imagine 2 regions on one day. It's windy and sunny in one place, and they have excess power. The other region is suffering from Dunkelflaut, a period of time with little wind or sun. The transmission lines let the first region sell power to the second. So when you build a solar or wind farm, your market isn't just local. Sometime in the future, the situation will be reversed, so the first region can import power using the same lines they used to export power previously.
And so the whole idea of a long-range transmission line is you can take the power from where it can be generated efficiently or cheaply and move it to the places that can't. And in that way, you get a much more efficient system, even if it might cost a little bit more.
I don't think Peter Zeihan has ever said anything I agree with more. The first video in this channel discussed exactly this issue. But as I said above, it's a bit more complicated. It's about regions with different weather sharing power because it's always windy and sunny somewhere, but it's not always windy and sunny where you are. So sharing power makes sense when you're relying on intermittent sources.
So, roughly, if you expand the grid by half, you need about $1 trillion in new new generation facilities, and then about $500 billion in distribution systems. That assumes you're doing everything within state boundaries.
Only in Texas do the state boundaries make that much difference. The continental U.S. is split up into 3 grids, East, West, and Texas. And the big East and West interconnection areas are further split up into regional transmission operators, or RTOs, and independent system operators, or ISOs, that are responsible for balancing the grid in their area. So generally, you're looking for power sources that are inside your region, not inside your state.
Here's the issue. The United States really doesn't have any of those long-range high-voltage lines. In fact, if you're looking at above 70 kilovolts, which is kind of the standard for like the big stuff, we only have 1 cluster in the country, and that is an area, roughly a triangle between Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Chicago, and St. Louis, because in the middle of that triangle is coal country. And back during the 60s, 70s, and 80s, a succession of American governments came to the conclusion that it was cheaper to wire electricity than it was to rail coal. So you generated the electricity within this triangle and then had these massive lines to send that power somewhere else. If the goal is to have a lot more electricity, regardless of why, that version of the model needs to be replicated more or less nationwide, and that is easily a $300 billion program, probably more.
Bringing up the map of the transmission lines again, I'm not sure what Peter's talking about. The point that we need to build a lot more transmission, I completely agree with. The $300 billion sounds like a reasonable estimate of the cost of this effort. But a study by the National Renewable Energy Lab demonstrated a net savings of hundreds of billions of dollars for expanding the grid. So this is money that's worth spending.
Now, data centers specifically. Something that everyone seems to forget is that data centers churn all the time, 24 hours a day, which means any sort of power generation that cannot generate electricity 24 hours a day is something that a data center will not consider.
Though this is largely true today, it doesn't have to be. Data centers could be operated to throttle down when the demand for data is lower. Do you think more people are watching Netflix at 5 p.m. or 2 a.m.? Also, generally, the cooling costs are lower during the night than during the day, which is a big chunk of the power demand for data centers. In other words, power demand is higher when solar power is plentiful. And if you want to be creative, you could make ice when the cost of electricity is low, and then use that for cooling when the cost of electricity is high. Another option is to train AI models when the electricity is cheap. The point is, there are opportunities for data centers to be responsive to the situation on the grid and reducing their peak demand.
So solar, out because it's dark every night. Wind, largely out because most places don't have reliable wind currents.
If we build the transmission that Zeihan talked about, then wind is not out. To meet a demand like a data center with solar and batteries alone sounds absurd, but it's actually not. Tesla just built the world's largest charging station, capable of charging 164 EVs at the same time and powered by 11 megawatts of solar panels and grid-scale batteries. And it was deployed in months, not over a decade like a nuclear or coal plant would. This is called behind the meter because the solar power never touches the grid. This is a smart way to build a data center, a large solar and battery facility behind the meter and a grid connection for when it's cloudy. The higher the capacity of the grid connection, the more difficult and expensive it is to get. So a setup like this makes sense.
Which really means you only have two options. Number one is you can build a new fleet of nuclear power plants because while they can be spun up and down, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission really doesn't like to see those numbers change because it looks a little bit like a meltdown, and we try to avoid those.
As I talked about in this video, TerraPower is building a nuclear power plant in Wyoming that can store heat when the need for electricity is low, and then generate electricity when the demand is high. This is the only nuclear power plant in the United States that is under construction right now. The idea of building a fleet of nuclear power plants quickly is a bit optimistic, given that the US has only built 3 in the last 3 decades.
So you build a nuclear power plant either specifically for it or nearby, or you refurbish an old one, whatever it happens to be, baseload power. That's what you're after, baseload power. The only other option is coal. I mean, yes, you can build a natural gas plant, but natural gas is better for spinning up and down.
The idea that we're going to be building coal plants in this day and age is pretty absurd. We've been decommissioning them as it's the dirtiest and most expensive way to generate electricity. The last large coal plant was commissioned over a decade ago, and no one is even talking about building new coal plants in the US. And there are plenty of baseload natural gas or methane-fueled power plants, and they're much more efficient than the peakers. We've also been decommissioning old methane power plants at the same time as we're building some new ones. But the bulk of new power capacity is coming from solar. and we've installed more battery capacity than either wind or methane. Looking at the levelized cost of electricity, we see that wind and solar with batteries is competitive with methane baseload and cheaper than methane peakers. And wind and solar have a couple of advantages over methane-fueled power plants. First, the prices for the entire lifetime of the project, while the cost of methane can go up and down and generally up. The other advantage is it's much faster to build a solar farm.
So either you're getting nukes or you're getting coal. And if you want data and you don't like those two things, then you might as well just not try to do AIs or data centers at all and just kind of forget the next 30 years of human technological advance. This is what you need. Lots of long-range transmission, lots of nukes, lots of coal, and then natural gas, solar, and wind for everything else. Anyone who cannot lay it out like that to you has been blinded by a degree of ideology or personal interests. This is what you need if a digital future or a more industrialized future is what you're after.
In my video about how Texas is an island, I showed how they're meeting demand growth almost entirely with solar and batteries. Does Zeihan think that utilities in Texas are blinded by ideology? I think they looked at their options and saw that solar plus batteries can be deployed quickly and inexpensively and meet their demands better than coal or nuclear. Even better than methane-fueled power plants. And Texas has a lot of methane, but still they're going with solar. In a matter of months, you can build a battery installation and solar farm. A wind farm would take a couple of years. A nuclear power plant optimistically takes 10 years. And I'm guessing you would just fail if you tried to build a coal plant today. So once again, Peter Zeihan accuses those who believe in decarbonization of not running the numbers. But he's the one not looking at what's actually happening on the ground, not running the numbers, not doing the math. Peter, before you put out another inaccurate video on energy policy, why not send me a copy of your script? I'm happy to review it for you for free. I'd rather be making videos about companies doing interesting things than correcting your misinformation. If you want to learn more about the electricity grid, I recommend these videos. But if you prefer Peter Zeihan diss tracks, you can check out these videos.